Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Analysing Anfield, your tactics and analytics podcast, courtesy of the Blood Red channel. I'm Josh Williams, and I'm joined by David Hughes. Dave, how's things, mate?
Good, mate. Yeah, I've just realised I haven't got my glasses on, which going against the grain a little bit, considering people were asking where I bought them last week. So I'll have to put some on in a minute so I can see what I'm doing. But except for all that, mate, I'm good. How are you?
I'm all right, yeah. We've got a fair bit to get through this week, so we're probably best getting started, considering this is the Q&A that I teased last week, and usually it takes us about 4 weeks to complete, so we're best getting done quick. So yeah, we've got Dave took half the questions, I've took half the questions as usual. Thanks for sending them in. We did get a fair amount. We will try and get through them all if possible. If we don't get to yours, it's just one of those unfortunate things. There's nothing in that. Don't take it personally. But yeah, I think we'll make a start, mate. So Dave, I'll let you go first.
Okay, mate. I will get some glasses on at this point. Not the frames I had on last week, by the way. So that was an oversight on my part. Substitute. Yeah, I don't know where the other ones are. Anyway, no one's tuned in for that talk. So yeah, to start, we had Neil Coates who said, "Can you do a bit of a deep dive on Taki? Obviously, Taki Minamino, his potential, stats, etc. Little bit of a certainly this season. It's not a straightforward one, that, because the obvious issue is lack of game time. He's played all competitions about just over 1,000 minutes. So it's really hard to take those numbers too serious, especially when you consider we're coming into April. A lot of the campaign's being played. It's not as if he's only coming in January, like was the case, a year or two ago. But interestingly, he's a player that does look good across that small sample. His numbers tend to be quite good. I think he scored about 9 goals this season, which works out at about just under 0.8 goals per 90, which is really high. And when you watch him, he does seem to do quite well. He's probably maybe a little bit better than we were concerned about Josh when we maybe spoke about him in the summer. Looked a little bit of a lost cause. I don't think that's the case now. In terms of potential, though, do I ever see him becoming a regular in this Liverpool side? Probably not. I think he is a good player. You can see why Liverpool signed him. He's a useful player. He seems to have a bit of a Jota knack in terms of scoring goals when given the opportunity to play. But do we kind of see him being a regular in this team? Probably not. But that doesn't mean that he might stick around.
When you say potential as well, he's 27. So yeah, I think certain players like Jota and Diaz have been signed as the next player to take the reins, basically. But I think Minamino was always signed as a backup. I think he'll always be that. He'll always be a decent one as well. So my first question is from Eric Belt, and it's the first of many on Salah's contract. We did get a fair few of these. We're going to address each one on an individual basis as long as it's unique enough. So his question is along the lines of, do you think the club is in a better position to not budge on Salah negotiations, basically because the club have bought in Diaz, bought in Jota for good deals, modern attacking players, and people talk about how you've got to replace Salah by spending hundreds of millions, but maybe Jota and Diaz are proof that you don't need to spend that much. And I think it's a great point. I agree. I think it's surprising me because people generally are terrified at the thought of Salah leaving. We're never going to be able to replace him or losing the best player in the world, all this sort of stuff. But Liverpool are the club that found him. Liverpool picked up Luis Diaz. Liverpool picked up Jota when other clubs from the same league seem to be totally overlooking him. Same when it comes to Sadio Mane and Roberto Firmino as well to an extent. So I think out of every club in the world, arguably, I think Liverpool are probably the best at picking up these forwards, just hit after hit after hit. And I think if Liverpool can't keep Salah for whatever reason, then I do think Liverpool are better equipped than any club in the world to replace him with a player who's going to compensate for his loss, basically. So I do think it's a great point. Anyone who is worried about losing Salah, and if Liverpool think they should bite the bullet and just pay him what he wants type thing, Liverpool have provided the evidence in the past few years that they don't really need to do that. They've got enough knowledge behind them, enough expertise behind them to, if Salah does leave, replace him with someone who's more than capable and potentially going to reach Salah's level in a few years' time. Liverpool, have always made superstars rather than signing them. And Salah is at a level now where he is a superstar. But if he wants to be paid to a certain level, Liverpool can't do it. I have no major issues with Liverpool just running the cycle again and getting the next one
in. Yeah, it's probably a good time to deal with these two questions because they're on the same subject. I'll combine them. Abdullah Kamara has asked, my question is, what will Liverpool do about the Mo Salah contract? Michael Lowe says, why are the negotiations taking so long? Shouldn't there be a case of agreeing an extension or put him on the market for a very big fee? It's kind of the same question, I guess, repackaged in a different way. And I mean, we've just touched on, I guess that was a fairly lengthy answer from you, Josh. I mean, I'll be honest, I
wasn't supposed to be.
No, but it kind of covered all bases. I predict at the start of not this season, the one after, that Salah probably won't be a Liverpool player. I think that's becoming quite clear now. But maybe Liverpool officials behind the scenes haven't really given up hope yet, which is why they haven't just kind of looked to slap a fee on him, I guess. But I do suspect that if an offer coming in the summer, a big one, probably at the stage now where they might sell, but I don't see where that offer comes from. So it may even be a case that they just have him for one more year, a bit like they did with Wijnaldum, make as much use as possible, knowing that he's going to go in the following summer. I don't know. It's a hard one, but I mean, to summarise, in my opinion, and we'll probably talk about Salah a little bit more as the show goes on, but I'm more and more of the opinion now that I don't think Salah's going to remain a Liverpool player over the next, or at the end of next summer.
Yeah, so I've got a question from Sampo Latinen. I think it is. I actually think that this person sends in a question a lot of the time, and that's the case with a few of these actually. So these regular listeners who are sending in questions all the time, thanks a lot. Sampo mentions, interesting question actually. He says, could statistics be utilised to identify hidden value in older players? Often statistics are used to find young rising stars whose value hasn't gone up yet. Could the same approach be used for players who are approaching the end? It's an interesting show, yeah, and I do think it's the case. One player who immediately comes to mind for me when it comes to this question is Thiago. Liverpool don't tend to sign players of Thiago's age, but in Thiago's case, Liverpool made an exception. And one of the reasons Liverpool made an exception is because he is ridiculously good. Now, one issue with this is you can probably tell that Thiago's ridiculously good without using the numbers. So, in that sense, I suppose you haven't spotted a hidden older gem who's extremely valuable. But I do think Liverpool will have been able to put a number on exactly what Thiago offers. And despite his age, they made the call that, okay, he's getting on, he doesn't fit the age profile, the age criteria that we typically go for. But in terms of what he offers on the pitch, he's so valuable. And there's plenty of numbers I'm sure we've referenced them on this show a number of times. I've sent them out on a few newsletters as to why he's so valuable compared to the average player. Keeps the ball brilliantly, but also progresses it well. Very active on the defensive side of the game. Able to find the valuable areas of the pitch without looking sometimes. So yeah, I think it's an interesting one. I think he's spot on, and I think Thiago was a great example for me. I'm not sure if you've got an example to add, Dave, of an older player maybe who showed up in the numbers and kind of came in, not specifically for Liverpool, just kind of anywhere.
Yeah, I think that the obvious difference between, so I guess normally what you find is younger players at the start of the journey you know, where they're coming from in that journey can hugely vary. You know, you could have a player in Belgium, I don't know, Ukraine, just kind of under the radar, not traditional big football and leagues. And then the numbers become a value because you can kind of see them excelling compared to the peers in that division, and that's how they become useful in terms of identifying. And then obviously you can go about your due diligence and more in-depth scouting to see just how good these players are and whether they're worth making a move. But obviously at the latter stages of your career, what tends to happen is the top talents have usually already been picked up by top sides. So it's very hard. The point I'm trying to make is to drift under the radar if you're a very good player for 5 or 10 years and then suddenly kind of be at a level where you could go to, like, you know, a Liverpool and come on their radar. So the reason numbers are so beneficial is because they tend to find those players where they're hidden, where there's the really good players have tended to already go on that path, already come through big sides and work their way up to the kind of the top end. And at that stage, you know, with so many eyes on the biggest teams, it's just so hard for players to drift on the radar. So I think Thiago is a good example. But again, you just knew he was a fantastic player as well.
Exactly,
you know, yeah, already playing at Bayern Munich, come through Barcelona, you know, one of the biggest clubs. I can't really think.
Can you think of anyone who did drift under the radar and just? I mean, how old was Payet when West Ham got Payet? Was he?
That's not a bad example, actually. How old was he?
Trying to think of some others who were signed late on in their careers and really made an impression after getting bought. I don't know.
So, I mean, he's 35 now. West Ham bought him in 2015, which is what? That's 7 years ago now. So, yeah, I mean, he's maybe not a bad example because he's only been Lille, Marseille before, hadn't he? They're probably the biggest names he'd been at. So he's an interesting example. Maybe if we had longer to think about it, we could bring up a couple. But just for the fact that we're struggling now, it shows how rare it is and why the value's normally in finding those players at a younger age.
Yeah, I agree, mate. Go next.
A massive change of direction here. Catherine.
I know what this is.
Yeah. Catherine Emma said, hi, Josh and Dave. Seen this question asked a lot, so thought I would bring it to the table. Are there more doors or wheels in the world? I'll tell you what, though. Here's my take on it. I think the answer is pretty obvious. And I am of the opinion that there would be more doors than wheels in the world. I'm going to try and explain a little bit as to why. So I looked into this because I took the question serious. And although there's many different places in which wheels and doors are used, as a starting point, I looked at like houses. So there's roughly, as an estimate, 2.4 billion homes across the world, and there's 1.2 billion vehicles. So that's a huge difference. Now, on average, there tends to be four wheels on a vehicle, doesn't it? Roughly. But if you actually think of like your house now, Josh, mine, people who are listening and watching, how many doors do you actually have in your house? You know, you have a door to each room, you have a door to I'm not sure about Tom just popped up there, that our producer, saying don't forget steering wheels. Okay, I'm not sure about that, but we'll say there's 5 wheels. But you know, in your house, how many could you count off the top of your head? You know, your front door, back door, door to each room in your house. I just think there's more in a home. So, in short, my answer to that would be to be more doors. But I'll open the floor to you in case you have a different opinion.
I agree. The only thing I would add in is we probably are underestimating how many scooters and bikes there's out there. I mean, I've been to Asia a fair few times in my life, and there's scooters and bikes absolutely everywhere. So, but I do agree with you. I think I'd side with doors, to be honest.
We never ever find out. We never will. It's a horrible question because you'll never get the answer.
I mean, it's PhD type stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's an interesting one, and it's the kind of analysing Anfield question we like, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I've got a question from Sue K. An interesting one, actually. Maybe I should have sent this one to you, because it says, do you think Liverpool as a city would have been better with just one club? A one-club city, meaning there was no split back in 1982, and Everton continued on at Anfield. I think there's pros and cons. I think Liverpool as a city, it has the potential to be a force. I think Liverpool is a force as a city anyway. And I think if you consider how passionate both fan bases are anyway, if you combine that, I mean, you would have a serious force to be reckoned with. I think it'd be virtually impossible to get tickets for the game. And as I said, the welcoming, when it comes to welcoming coaches to Anfield on European nights or whatever, if you had the combined power of Goodison as well, it would be a serious force. As I said, it'd be something to really thingy. But when it comes to whether it'd be better, I like the Merseyside derby. I like the whole concept of Liverpool, are you a red or a blue type thing in Liverpool. Every family's got mixes of both in some cases. Both clubs have got different histories, although they're kind of brother and sister, if you like. So I don't know. There's pros and cons to it, isn't it? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I can see the point you're making, definitely. I try and think of equivalents of kind of one club, big cities, and the two stand out are Leeds and Newcastle. Yeah, they're the two big ones.
What I will say,
go on.
What I will say is, this isn't intended as a dig, that the city would be so happy if every single person in the city supported the same club and that club was doing as well as, say, Liverpool is at the minute. And I remember a few seasons ago, Liverpool did well under Rodgers, and the same year, I think Bobby Martinez got Everton to 5th, was it? Something like that.
Yeah, when they were chasing Champions League.
Yeah, I just remember that year, everyone in the city being so happy about their own club. And I think if Everton fans had a better situation at doing it, maybe that'd be the case. But I think if everyone supported one club and that club was as successful as Liverpool are at the moment, at least with Jurgen Klopp in charge and stuff, it would be a very happy place to be, basically.
Well, that was very much, we weren't alive for it, but if you speak to anyone who's a little bit older, that was very much the 80s, wasn't it? You know, it was both teams were the best, you know, kind of Liverpool won the league, Everton won the league, Liverpool won it, then Everton won it. Both kind of regulars going to Wembley, you know, competing on, obviously the post-Heysel stuff changed a little bit, but before that, you know, both kind of two of the better sides in Europe as well. So, you know, that would have been a great time, I imagine. But, yeah, I don't know. And what I would say is, and this, it's easy to say this when it'll never happen, but I do feel like if Merseyside had just one club, I think it would be a lot bigger than Newcastle and Leeds. And that shouldn't really, it doesn't seem like that would make sense geographically. But it just feels like it would, you know. Everton tend to sell out every week about 38,000. Liverpool obviously sell out that 50-odd thousand. Liverpool could easily get, I'd say, another 20-odd thousand in there. Everton, despite being rubbish, got a waiting list of something like 10,000 for season tickets. So, you know, what's that about? You know, you're looking over potentially over 100,000 people who are willing to pay to go to football matches. So, yeah, be a big force for sure. But I'm with you. I like it how it is. I know, obviously, Everton have let the team down a little bit over these past few years. You know, they're kind of not really doing much. If they were a bit more competitive, I think it would add another edge to the derby. But I still think it's the best the way it is.
Yeah, I agree, mate.
Rhino quickly asked, do you think the future CB partnership is Gomez and Konate? I don't believe all the media nonsense that Gomez is an average defender. Are there any numbers to back up? He's as good as Klopp believes. Interestingly, I read that question and I haven't seen much of that media talk. Maybe it's a little bit deeper in the kind of Liverpool circles. But to answer the question, yeah, I still think he can be a really top defender. I think at times I've watched them, I've been really impressed. Again, problems are he had a big injury last season. He's not played a lot of football this season either, has he? But he still is only 24. So although we can't lean on the numbers too much, which you never can anyway, really, with defenders, we know that, don't we? It's a little bit more difficult to caption in black and white just how good they are. But when you watch him, he is a good, well-rounded defender. He's got loads of good physical attributes as well. So, yeah, definitely I haven't written Gomez off. I'm surprised. I mean, have you heard much of this? And I'll be honest, I hadn't seen much of it. I thought he was still quite highly well-revered.
No, I don't think it's so much the media. From what I see, it's just sections of the fan base, and not big sections and like that. But one thing I liked about it on that one is, I think people maybe underestimate how long Van Dijk will be around for. If you think of Van Dijk's career, it kind of peaked really late. It's arguably still peaking. I don't think he started playing football until he was quite late in his development. And if you think of now what Thiago Silva's doing, I wouldn't be surprised if Van Dijk still performing to a really high level at Liverpool, like age 36 and stuff, considering how little energy he has to use in a lot of his defending. I think Van Dijk's longevity could be a problem for Gomez, to be honest.
I think it's a really good point,
yeah. So I've got a question from Terry Finnegan, and he says, if Salah were to leave, is it possible Liverpool would sign a right-footed attacker in his place? How would this change things tactically? So, I don't think so, personally. If it was me in charge, I would be very reluctant to do it unless the right-footed forward was someone like Mbappe, and he was, equally capable on both flanks, and he was very two-footed anyway, and things like that. It's maybe a bit different if the player is very two-footed like Jota or like Mane, but I still think, given the nature of Liverpool's 4-3-3, where the player on the left cuts in using his right, the player on the right cuts in using his left, it's very nice the way it works. It works naturally, and I think a lot of the reason it works naturally is because Salah is left-footed, and I think if you put a right-footed player there, I mean, just think about yourself now. I've played as a forward a fair few times. If I'm playing on the side of my preferred foot, if I'm on the ball or taking on a player or whatever, I am more inclined to drive towards the corner flag than the goal. Whereas if I'm playing on the opposite flank, I'm more inclined to cut inside and drive towards goal. And Liverpool need the latter, the players who will drive towards goal and score goals rather than the players who will hug the touchline and put in crosses. Liverpool aren't a crossing team, so, well, not at least in terms of the front three positions. So I would, although it's difficult, I would do what I can to keep the left-footed dynamic over there. I've said before, Jared Bowen's left-footed, Rafinha's left-footed. And if you can get a right-footed player who's seriously better than Bowen, like Mbappe, fine, do it. But if you can get a player who's right-footed and he's only slightly better than Bowen, I'd probably take the slight drop in quality to have the left-footed pick, if you know what I mean. So I think it's an important element to keep.
Yeah, I agree. I think although the player is obviously important, I think the profile is just as important, and that in many ways is Salah is just the best version of that profile. But I still think you need that profile if you want to carry on playing the same way. Because there's no real target man to cross to, is there? It's not really Liverpool's game, and if you think about driving to that corner of the pitch, all you can really do, you're coming away from goal, so all you can really offer there is crosses, and that's not really what they're looking for, especially when you have the wing backs that they do.
Yeah, that's it.
Where are we up to? Alex Webster. He says, in my opinion, Fabinho is our most important player, and when he doesn't play, we seem to lose control in the midfield and the protection of our back four. We've been linked with Bissouma. Now there's a lot of discussions around Tchouameni being one of our main targets this summer. I'd like to know how these players compare to Fabinho and whether you think they could provide a similar level of control. Alternatively, if you think there's better options out there, let me know who they are. Yeah, we talked about Bissouma before. I like Bissouma. weirdly, with his name being mentioned now, I feel like I've not paid that much close attention to him this year. I think he's still been performing fairly well, but obviously there was a little bit of a to do at the start of the season. He looked like he wasn't going to be in the team for a while, but he is, and he's carried on kind of doing his thing. Tchouameni's an interesting one. I think that the key to answer your question, I think a big difference is, and we use him as an example, he's 22, Fabinho's 28, so one's in the prime kind of top end. You know, he's got tons of experience in the elite side of the game. The other is still really kind of learning his trade a little bit, you know, at the very highest level. So although they share similar traits, I do think that that's something to consider. You know, would there be a drop in quality? Probably. And I think that's probably the case for Bissouma as well. I'm not sure. I think Bissouma is a fantastic player, but I don't know if his ceiling is as high as, say, Fabinho. So I guess where I stand on that. In terms of alternatives, or I think the question was more centered around similar players. You know, maybe use a tool that we've talked about in the past. If you could just type his name in on FBref, it'll bring up his page and it'll bring up very similar players on there. So, you know, people can go and have a little look and see who stylistically, at least in the numbers, kind of shows up very similar to him as a player.
Yeah, so I've got a question from Alan Lloyd. We usually get at least one of these, and I would find them quite tricky to answer because I simply didn't see Liverpool back in this time. So he asks, of all the great late 80s Liverpool sides, which players do you think would best fit the current LFC team? So it's difficult for me this one because I said I haven't seen the players play. They were before my time, if you like. But based on what I do know, some players come to mind as fits for the system. John Barnes maybe comes to mind as a player who suits the kind of wide forward type role. Ian Rush is obviously a player who was before his time in terms of his willingness to press and things like that. I do think he's slightly different to what we've seen lead the line for Liverpool in the past few years. But I do think if Klopp had a traditional 9 who's very, very good, like a Lewandowski or a Kane, Klopp would have played them. You know, it's daft to consider that Liverpool wouldn't have played those players because he didn't fit the system. They're just too good. You build the system around them. So I think Rush would have been a capable player. I also think potentially Alan Hansen as well. It reminds me of a bit of an 80s version of Van Dijk in a way, in terms of just how cool he was on the ball, how calm he was, but also, you know, very, very progressive in his passing and a little bit got shades of Joel Matip maybe. And I think he had good height. I think he's about 6'2" or something like that, Alan Hansen. So yeah, there's a few players. I mean, Gerrard I'd throw in there as well, but he's not the 80s, is he? But as I said, I haven't seen any of these players play. But based on what I do know, I'd throw Rush in there, throw Barnes in there. There's quite a few of them, Beardsley as well.
Yeah, I haven't got much to add on that one, so I'll smile, agree, and move on. In terms of I thought this was actually really interesting question, Josh, because initially I thought, well, we do say this a lot and we don't usually address it, why. And if you were just tuning in, you might come up with this question. So I do think it's something worth us addressing. But Sean O'Connor says, why do you often reference a player being English as an attribute? Surely the podcast is more about tangible statistical proof to back up opinions. Yeah, it is in some ways. But, you know, we think it's a little bit more than that as well. It's not just about the numbers. That being said, to address your question, it's more to do with the fact that Premier League sides need at least 8 homegrown players on their squad. So having someone, it almost kind of ticks a box, doesn't it? If you can bring in a really, really good player who has all those attributes that we normally refer to, but then he's English as well, you fit in a quota, I guess, and it takes that pressure off recruitment elsewhere. So I believe that's why it's really important. And then there are other smaller reasons, you know, say if they know the league a little bit better. There's maybe
speak the language.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Yeah, speak the language. Trying to think of any. Can you think of anything else?
I think there's something in there. If you're an English club, you could argue you should really have an English core, if you know what I mean. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when it comes to Barcelona, for example, I always think Barcelona should have a Spanish core. There's just something about it. Juventus should have an Italian core. Bayern Munich should be predominantly German. And English clubs, I think, have a bit of a tendency to move away from that at times, almost by accident. But I think Liverpool have done well in the past few years through, you know, having, you know, Jordan Henderson, James Milner as real pillars in the team. Robertson is Scottish, but, you know, it's vaguely similar in terms of his understanding of the game and things like that. And there's Perks, Trent Alexander-Arnold's obviously Scouse. So I think that comes into it. And I also think that when it comes to us referencing the English thing, particularly to do with younger players who are maybe coming through as academy products, like Harvey Elliott or Curtis Jones, one of the reasons I mention it sometimes is because it's a valuable pick in terms of value in the transfer market. You can, if you're selling an English player or a British player, even someone who's homegrown, you just seem to be able to charge this extra tax, and these Premier League clubs, for whatever reason, seem willing to pay it.
I mean, Grealish is a prime example, isn't he? Grealish is obviously fantastic talent, but I think you could find equivalents of Grealish's talent somewhere in Europe. You know, there's players of that quality, but would they have generated 100 million as a transfer fee? Probably unlikely. So that's a big one. But yeah, I mean, the crux of the answer, just to be clear again, is there's a it's not
just a Patriots answer, is it?
Yeah,
it's not just oh, he's English, great.
Yeah. There's not. It's not that. It's not kind of putting it on a pedestal being English. It's more just that, you know, and certainly in terms of Premier League sides, it's you do need at least 8. So if you can get a really good player who has that in the locker as well, then it's a bonus.
So I've got a question from Mikey Ware, and he asks, how come left-sided attackers such as Jota, Diaz and Mane can all play on the right if needed, but there's no discussion that I'm aware of? Ari Tsimikas delivering for Trent, covering for Trent, where he's out injured. He's one of the most two-footed. Yeah, it's a good shout. I've seen it mentioned once or twice. Someone messaged me last week about this, and I put a viz up somewhere. I can't remember what I put it up. But I think he's the third most two-footed player in the squad, behind only Jota and Mane. But the bottom line is, I don't really know. I do think it's different though, operating on both flanks as a forward compared to doing it as a fullback, particularly in the Liverpool system. Because in the Liverpool system, you are, particularly the fullbacks, they're supposed to provide the width. They're supposed to hug the touchline, essentially. And if you put a player, I said before, didn't I? If you put a player on the opposite flank to his preferred foot, he is naturally going to start coming inside on the ball. And in Liverpool's system, if the fullbacks start doing that, everybody is in the middle. Everybody ends up in the centre of the park. So I understand the shout. But as I said, with Liverpool's fullbacks, you really need them to stay out wide most of the time. I know Trent is starting to come inwards lately, a bit of a new development this season, but whenever he does that, Henderson moves out wide, so that's reliant on that relationship, or Salah will stay out wide. But I think predominantly the fullbacks are still the players who provide the width in the team, usually. And it would be tricky for Tsimikas to do that, using his wrong foot, if you know what I mean. But having said that, in certain games, particularly when Liverpool were the strongest, I wouldn't mind seeing it maybe as an experiment or whatever, because I do think stylistically, I think Tsimikas is probably more similar to Trent than he is to Robertson, to be honest, because I think Robertson is just a Duracell bunny, isn't he, in terms of going up and down all day and threatening him behind and hitting crosses from the byline, whereas I think Tsimikas is a bit more like Trent in terms of his passing being the real threat and being a bit more cultured on the ball, if you know what I mean. But yeah, it's an interesting show.
Yeah. Andy Poole asked, are Nico Williams' underlying numbers similar to Trent in comparison to the other fullbacks in the Championship. So I did have a quick glance. Obviously, we are a little bit time sensitive, but I did look into it, and two of the more basic areas of chance creation we can look at, and that's the big one, isn't it? Really, obviously, we want him to be able to defend. We know he can, but I think the big one when we're talking about comparisons to Trent is creation, and obviously we saw he's scored goals and assists there already. But in terms of things a little bit deeper, and those would be key passes and progressive passes, he ranks third in the whole Championship for players who've played 500 plus league minutes so far. So yeah, that's third for key passes and third for progressive passes. In terms of per 90 numbers, they're both a little lower than what Trent's producing in the Premier League. So Williams' key passes 0.65 per 90, progressive passes 10.2 per 90. Trent is, I think he's a lot closer to, he's about 1.1 for key passes off the top of my head, and somewhere around over 15 for progressive passes per 90. So the numbers are lower than Trent, but let's be honest, we kind of expect that, wouldn't we? But I think he's in a good place, Williams. Now, I think that was a really good move for them to go to Fulham. They obviously, under Marco Silva, have a big emphasis on fullbacks getting heavily involved in going forward. It's a great breeding ground, I should say, for Williams to do well. And so far, he's definitely grasping his opportunity there, and he's showing really well in the numbers and performing well there. And I expect he's going to come back a better player.
Yeah. I've got a question from Katie Kopp. That name rings a bell. I think we always flag that name. Whether it's an actual name, I don't know, but
I would like to know if it is or not. If she can maybe
tell us next time.
Yeah.
So, are you generally concerned the Salah contract issue is still unresolved? Surely FSG understand that one of the world's best players is going to cost a lot of money to retain. No, I don't feel that concerned, actually. I was more concerned earlier in the season. But now, I'm getting more at peace with it, I think. And I think a lot of that stems from what I said before in terms of just having so much trust in Liverpool's recruitment practices and Liverpool's ability to replace Salah if needed. And I think Liverpool will have offered him what he deserves, in their eyes at least, in reference to the rest of the squad. I do think he'll be offered the highest earner, but I think he wants more. I'm not particularly sure why he's digging his heels into the ground, if you like, but he seems to be. And if he's doing that, if the player wants to... I sent out a newsletter a few weeks back, and I kind of concluded the newsletter with FSG have kind of pulled the master stroke, really, because they've kind of put Liverpool in a position now whereby if you want to win, you essentially come to Liverpool. Now, if you want to get paid, you go elsewhere. That's kind of the dynamic that FSG have struck at Liverpool now because of the quality of the squad that they've constructed, the state of Anfield, the elite status of the coach, and Liverpool's ability to compete for the biggest honours every year. So, if Liverpool can strike that balance, which they have over the years, it makes Liverpool look brilliant, and it makes any player who leaves, whether Salah does or doesn't, relatively odd. I mean, I'm not sure why he would, apart from all Liverpool are not offering. Liverpool are offering him everything across the board except an extra $100,000 a week. So it depends how important that is to you. So no is the answer. I'm not that concerned. I'm at peace. Whatever happens, I have trust in the club to do the right thing performance-wise.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, it worked out quite well. This the next question I had here off David Williams was how high do you think Liverpool have gone in regard to Mo Salah's weekly contract? His own bet is around 300,000 per week, but he does point out that other players might have clauses in their contracts, so that they could be on very close or the exact same to the highest earner in the squad. Obviously, FSG simply won't just bend. Salah's age goes against them. it looks as if it's only going one way. What do we think? I mean, we've touched on it, haven't we? I said it a little bit earlier. I don't see him being a Liverpool player at the end of his current deal. Could get my eye wiped, of course. A lot can happen in football. One way I think that could change is if it becomes very clear to Salah and his representatives that the deal or the offer that he's open for won't be forthcoming. You know, we've tried to, between us, work out what clubs we think he could end up moving to. And that list is very small, and even the ones that have been we talked about are not guaranteed. You know, the only one we can realistically kind of make a case for is PSG, but you know, that in itself comes with its own drawbacks, as we saw with likes of Messi going there, Neymar. You know, it hasn't really. Certainly, I think Messi, we know what's going on there. You know, it's at the end of his career, but certainly Neymar. You know, Neymar went there, arguably in the peak, still an elite talent, to try and take them onto the next level, win Champions League and carry on being that superstar. He is still a superstar, but I don't know if in 15 years' time will he look back and regret that move. Potentially, he did try and leave, didn't he? Obviously, people forget that. I actually forgot that until I watched I don't know if you've seen it yet, Josh, the Neymar documentary on Netflix.
I haven't seen it yet, no.
Yeah, it's worth a watch, mate. But yeah, obviously he tried to leave. I'd forgot about that. But in short, yeah, you're probably right around the figure that you've mentioned, 300k. And I don't think he'll get that extra 100 grand that Josh mentioned. And yeah, it's a tough one. Anything to add on the Salah stuff, Josh?
No, I'm sure we will between now and the end of the season. But considering this is a Q&A, I suppose we're best spreading the questions around, and I think we've had a fair few about Salah, so I think I'll move on to a question from Mike Wall, and it's a FPL question. He asks, it's well known in the FPL space that the forward option is terrible, bar Kane. With your analyst hats on, who would you recommend?
Josh Williams can take this one, trust me. In years I forget this, so yeah, you take this one, mate, on your own.
Dave is actually somehow being relegated.
I'm close to it, I'm telling you. Let's not talk about me.
So I think the only one I'd recommend at the minute, specifically because of the fixtures upcoming, I'd probably get in Weghorst. I think I'm looking at doing that anyway. He's got a few doubles. Okay, he's got Manchester City, but in between the doubles, I think he's got Norwich. And his record in the Bundesliga was good. He's playing for Burnley, not great, but his record in the Bundesliga, I think, for something like 6 seasons running up until his Burnley move, he scored at least 10 Bundesliga goals every year. So he's a proven scorer, and he's probably the player I'll be looking to get in. But whether he will catch fire or not, I am not too sure.
Next question. Larkin H. Possession is a couple of people have done this, but I don't know if you feel like this, Josh. I feel reluctant sometimes to say it, but I'll say it this time. He starts saying, "Hey guys, big fan of the pod, so thank you." Possession is a stat often cited by fans and media. Brighton leads in the top 6 for possession, but nowhere close to that in the table. Liverpool drew with Arsenal with a 78 possession share, lost to West Ham with 68, won versus Brighton with 48. What's the best way to talk about and analyse possession? Is it only as good as the goals it leads to? And thank you for your hard work. Yeah, so briefly, possession is just a descriptive stat really. It doesn't directly link to success. It's more, linked to philosophy, I guess. Some obviously value it, other coaches not so much. My personal point of view is I prefer my team to dominate the ball. I think it aids in so many departments. It can help you build attacks better, have pitch control, largely dominate proceedings. The obvious one is the opposition can't score if they don't have the ball, so chances are they'll have fewer chances than you. And there's a reason why, all the best sides really across Europe, if you actually think about it, dominate the ball. You know, there might be the odd example, like maybe Atletico. You know, they don't necessarily dominate, do they? Although, you know what, I bet you if we looked at the possession stats now, they'd still be quite high up there. But yeah, on the whole, there's a reason why the top side tend to look to dominate the ball. So it's not the be all and end all. I'd only use it as a descriptive stat, really, but it does definitely link a lot to playing philosophy.
Yeah, so I've got a question from Luke Young. He asks, being realistic, if you could sign one player in the summer, who would it be and why? It's a bit of a difficult one, that. But I think looking at Liverpool's squad, I like the shout that Tchouameni has put forward. Liverpool got linked a few months back. At the time, I hadn't even thought about it because I didn't think it was that much of a realistic one, because he was getting linked with Real Madrid and he was getting linked with Chelsea and stuff like that. But it since seems to be a case of, like, for about 40-50 million, maybe you could acquire him considering this contract situation. And I do think what he offers, I mean, Liverpool have gained control in the past few months. Liverpool are really keeping clean sheets all the time now, so I'm not sure we need him so much anymore. But at the time, at least, I thought Liverpool really needed a player like that. And I would like to see him at Liverpool. I think he looks to be, in the numbers at least, extremely active without the ball, in terms of just making tackles and interceptions and things like that. You have to be careful with stuff like that, but he does seem very active like that. Very young, full of potential on the ball. Good size, fits with Liverpool's typical midfield. So I think he's a player who I would like to see at Anfield. Another one as well is Bellingham, but I think Bellingham's a little bit less likely considering his contract and considering Dortmund are probably going to lose Haaland this summer. So I don't think Bellingham will move, personally. But yeah, that's just off the top of my head. Maybe there's more I'd be able to think of.
Ben Marshall asks, with Nico Williams probably leaving, Gomez probably leaving. I'd be surprised if they both happen, but as I said, maybe I'm missing it. There's been a lot of talk of their replacements. Van der Berg was signed as a centre-back, but seems to have played most of the season as a right wing-back. Is he ready to step up as the fourth choice centre-back and maybe even a backup for Trent? I think as a centre-back, he can obviously be good cover, although I don't think he's good enough yet from what I've seen. But on the point of being a right back, no, I can't see that one. You know, I think as a profile, he's completely different to Trent, isn't he? And I did, from what I've seen of Preston, and you know, maybe Ben will come back and tell me I'm wrong, but from what I've seen of Preston this year, it seems that they play with a three at the back, but he seems to be more part of that defensive trio, as opposed to, you know, the right wing back in the system. As I said, that maybe I've not seen enough of them. I'm getting it wrong, but I think that would probably make more sense. I think he's a bit more suited for that. I think he's played right wing back once or twice, but predominantly he plays as a centre back in the back three. Again, that's something else that tends to be of benefit to central defenders who maybe aren't the strongest. You know, I'm not going to put him in that bracket for now, but in short, you know, he's got the potential to be that kind of fourth choice centre back, but I can't see him being a right wing back or right back option for Liverpool going forward.
So I've got another one from Luke. This is a bit of a fun one. And I haven't planned for this, so I'm going to do this off the top of my head. He says, Josh, during your lifetime, which is the crucial part of this, during your lifetime, what players make up your best Liverpool starting 11? So I would go Klopp as the coach, and I'd go Alisson, Rodson, Van Dijk, Matip, Trent, Fabinho, Thiago, Gerrard, Salah, Mane, Suarez. So basically the current team, but Suarez and Gerrard included. I suppose that's a testament to the current level of the current side. And I must stress as well that's based purely on like just pure individual level and quality. Obviously, I'd like to throw someone like Jordan Henderson in there, but he doesn't make it in terms of his level. Don't get me wrong, he's great. I love him. I think he's great, but he doesn't make it in terms of his level. Xabi Alonso, his level was reached after Liverpool, I think, or in his final season at Liverpool. Mascherano, again, honourable mention, brilliant. Sami Hyypiä, honourable mention, but I don't think I'd have any arguments, to be honest, with that one. I think that's pretty clear.
Yeah, there's not much I'd change in that, to be honest. You know, it is just adding those kind of two real elite Liverpool players of the last 20 odd years who didn't make it in this group. You know, come a little bit before that, just adding them into it. I mean, that'd be a ridiculously good side. Where am I up to? Lee Connor says, with the aging midfield, should we go for a Bellingham /Rice /Phillips type signing in the summer, or rely on our younger players coming through? I think definitely if you can add ready-made quality into the side, then that's really important, because, you know, if you think about what Liverpool are doing, they're kind of competing on all fronts. In terms of an all-round squad, they're really in the prime, you know, one of the best in the world right now. Can't really afford too many big transition periods if you want to make use of this, because whilst you can plan ahead and recruit well, there's still no guarantee that you can replicate what you have now. So this could be a finite period where Liverpool can really, you know, have a lot of success. So yeah, I think if you can add ready-made quality in there, then that's important to do so, because it also takes the pressure off any younger players coming through. You know, there's not as big an expectation on them. They can kind of be bedded in more naturally, which, you know, helps them as well. So yeah, if one of those ready-made talents can be purchased, then definitely. But what we have seen with Liverpool, and we've applauded it in the past, is they won't just spend for the sake of spending it. You know, if there is someone that they can rely on who's coming through, and maybe go for a better suited target 12 months later, then they'll do that. So there's no guarantee that they will go for one of those three names, and maybe someone better suited might be in the pipeline to be purchased at a later date. But yeah, for me, if you can get one of them in, then you do it.
So I think we're going to leave it there, mate. I still have plenty left. I'm sure you do as well, as usual. So what we're probably going to do is revisit the rest next week. Didn't get through very many at all on my side, really, by the looks of it. But yeah, we've got plenty to do another episode next week. So if you haven't heard your question yet, listen in next week. Hopefully it'll come up. And we've also got the odd game, I think, to preview next week. Well, I mean, we don't preview games as much anymore, do we? Talk about overriding talking points, but we'll try and make this a part of next week's show. So thanks for sending in the questions. Dave, thanks for joining us, mate.
Yeah, thank you, mate. And yeah, just to answer your question, I've got a few left. So yeah, apologies that we didn't get through them, but we will.
Yeah, we'll sort that next week. So thanks for tuning in this week. Thanks for sending in your questions. And do join us for part 2 next week. See you then.